Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. This was a real experience for a couple of young guys like us.
It was. Yes, it was.
I'm actually really happy you put this one on the list. I have seen a lot of the, Universal monster movies from back in the day over the years, but somehow the Wolfman movies were ones that just sort of slipped through. And so I've seen, stills and posters and pictures and stuff, but I'd never actually watched this movie, didn't really know much about what it was about or anything. And so it was really fun to go back and revisit it, because this one is often cited as one of the very influential early horror movies.
Yeah. That was my thing. We had talked in the past about it'd be cool to do classic monster movies and stuff like that. And so I just kind of tied it into this the 100 Years of Horror, thinking it'd be great just to kind of slip these in while we got a chance. And it would be less work, so we don't have to watch 100 movies on Frankenstein or, whoever, whichever monster. Yeah.
No, it was a good pick. And I, for the most part, enjoyed the movie. My favorite part was that it was only 70 minutes long.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can I get an amen? I'm all about that life.
I know you don't have a season where I pick movies where they're that
our
long.
Longest one so far is an hour and 28 minutes or something. But,
I'd really like to have the Wolfman. It's 2 hours long. No, we don't need no.
Yeah. I feel like the lack of seeing movies in theaters has really, really decreased my appetite for the amount of time I can sit still and pay attention to the TV. Mm-hmm. Because when you're in the theater, you sit and it's dark and you've got surround sound and it's a much more immersive experience. Whereas when you're at home, then there's other people in the house. You got your dog you got to worry about.
Yeah.
There's other sounds, just all kinds of stuff that can distract you and kind of break you out of that. And you don't really get that same focus.
Yeah. I mean, when we do it at home, it's no different than us just, talking with our wives and deciding to watch a specific movie, so it might be something she wants to watch that we're not into. And so I'm on Reddit or, whatever the case is. So it is definitely harder at the house. But I feel like I have gotten worse since I haven't been to the movies in over a year.
Yeah, it's just habit for me to pull out my phone and look at IMDb and stuff when a movie's on now. But anyway.
It is.
So well, let's get this kicked off. I will introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into the lycanthropic details. In 1941, Universal Pictures added to its repertoire of classic monster movies by bringing us The Wolfman. This creature horror film tells the story of a man named Larry who returns home after a long time away, only to discover rumors of cursed men who transform into beasts by the light of the full moon. Even Larry isn't safe from the curse of lycanthropy. This film was made on a budget of about $180,000 in 1940s money, which is probably $1 billion or something today. The Wolfman can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Math checks out.
Always does on this show.
Yep. So, did you know that the makeup took about 6 hours to apply?
I did not.
But it only took 3 hours to get off.
I'm kind of surprised it took that long.
I was thinking the same thing. I feel like taking things off should be a lot easier. That's just on them.
Just hop in the shower.
So, Lawrence Talbot's struggle in this movie was influenced by the guy who wrote the film and his own experiences. So he was
with lycanthropy.
He was so he was a Jewish man of Polish descent, but he was born in Germany, in 1902. He always like had this thing for writing. Like, I wish I kind of had the gift to be able to write. I don't know why I don't. Spelling, that's why. Anyway, so he had this gift, but in true fashion of parents, his parents wanted him to be like an engineer or mathematics, into math, something less fun and less artistic. Anyway, but he still continued to write and do all that. Long story short, I don't know if you guys heard about this. There's a guy named Hitler came out. Terrible guy, for the record. Did some research. Awful guy. But the guy moved to, not Hitler, the guy who wrote this moved to France and then to UK and then left Europe altogether. But where I'm getting at is, this is actually kind of like a representation of his of his life. So I keep saying his because I'll mess up the guy's name. I mean, it's Kurt Siodmak. I don't know. I'm sorry. So Kurt is the name of the writer, but basically, like, it was him basically saying, I'm a writer, but I can't be accepted by, the people around me because I should be into mathematics or, engineering. So he didn't feel like he could be his true self. And that's why he kind of felt, like, the dark subtext of this is that he is the Wolfman. At literal quote, I am the Wolfman. He said, I was forced into a fate I didn't want. And this, it's a story of an outsider whose destiny was cursed by forces he could not control. And I definitely, respect that, working, the way we work and stuff. It's like, is this what I should be doing when we're, our passion's kind of music or what, whatever it is, motorcycles or whatever we're doing. And I definitely relate. And I thought it was, interesting to actually see Kurt, talk about that in an interview about a very iconic movie where I feel like he was more so probably just writing about how he didn't want to, be an engineer. He had another passion he had another career he was passionate about. So, where I'm getting at is, you guys should go for your dreams.
I gave up my passions 5.5 years ago, and I'm happier for it.
Me too.
Punch that clock, cash that paycheck, watch horror movies.
Yep. But then the problem is we just have to pay for these, so we're negative a lot of money. We're not bringing in a lot of income with this podcast.
Oh no, I just mean I just go to work.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't worry about the passion part.
Well, there is the theory of you work to play, right?
Yeah.
Or you can play while you work, which I don't understand because I haven't ever played at work.
No.
So Bela Lugosi wanted to play the main character in this film.
Yeah.
He lost it to Lon Chaney Jr.
That still boggles my mind.
But then they were like, hey, we feel bad for you. How about you come in and you can be a fortune teller and we're going to name you Bella. We know that you struggle with names. And if it's anything other than Dracula, you might not get it. So we're going to call you Bella. Yep. And so he got that part.
Yeah, I did not realize that was him at all until I was browsing IMDb during the movie.
So Kurt, the guy who wrote this film, he came up with the poem, the quote unquote ancient poem that was him. But in 1989, he told journalist Tom Weaver, nowadays film historians think it's from German folklore. It isn't. I made it up. Which, a fun fact about the poem, it was repeated verbatim in 2004's Van Helsing.
Nice.
And then the last fact I have is, I just kind of find this kind of interesting because you always hear about tension between actors and stuff. So there was actually tension between Evelyn Ankers and Chaney, who played Wolfman. Basically, long story short, which I think this is hilarious. Chaney was upset because Ankers got his dressing room. That's what started the kind of tension. And so then Chaney, being the professional that he is, did a bunch of pranks on Anchor's female lead to kind of get back at her, but like she didn't find it funny at all, and he just kept doing it, kind of like an annoying kid. And I just was like, you guys are like, as an adult, like you guys, like this is over a dressing room. Where's like your chivalry or what, you know, whatever. It's the 40s, right?
Real mature guys.
I know, like just you need it. Fuck. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of funny that their beef was because Chaney didn't get the dressing room he was promised, and it makes me think of like movies where like they have like the. Or like you know in that thing you do where they're talking to a record producer and he's like eating the mustard sandwich and he's pissed and he's just talking, he's just real trashy, but when the pictures come out like he's super nice and all that. I just kind of thought like maybe that's how it really was in Hollywood back then.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Jay was like, "Are you kidding me? Like you gave this to her?" But anyway, so that was they had a little bit of tension, which you wouldn't be able to tell on the film, but pretty funny nonetheless.
Yeah.
But those are my howling facts about the Wolfman.
Nice.
I wrote that, and I thought of something that would have been something you would have said in the intro.
Yeah. Yeah, opportunity missed there on my part, but
you pulled out Liechtenstein.
Yeah. So this movie, in the beginning, in the opening credits, it showed like silent shots of the actors with both their name and the character name, and I love that, and I think movies should start doing that. Couldn't
agree more. I thought the exact same thing.
I wouldn't have to spend so much time on IMDb during the movie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you knew it introduced you to the characters. And as like kids who were brought up in the 90s, like were, it's not just the 90s, but with all the, you know, sitcom shows, that was the intros, you know, so it's just something we're used to. But it was done back in the 40s.
Yeah. Yeah, I also, then after that, it showed like the dictionary entry for lycanthropy. And I know that word because I listened to Patrick Wolf. That was the name of his first album that was at least available anywhere. And it was interesting, though, for me to see it kind of spelling out there in the very beginning, like the mythology of werewolves. And thinking like at the time that wasn't really like an established movie trope. I know there had been at least one kind of werewolf movie before, but it wasn't, nothing had been anywhere near this successful. Mm-hmm. And so in the same way that like vampire and Nosferatu showed like mythology text for vampires, this one kind of did the same thing with the werewolf. And so there were things in there that would have never even crossed my mind about like the pentagram being a symbol of the werewolf. And then that was a thing that shows up a lot throughout the movie. Had it not been for the text in the beginning, it would have never occurred to me that that was a connection I was supposed to be making.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever associated or like seen it associated with pentagram and werewolves.
Yeah. I just thought about the metal band.
Yeah. Same.
But yeah, and the film quality on this one was super crisp. Like it reminded me a lot of like later years Twilight Zone. And I thought the sound was good. It actually had like some Foley. And overall, this one, you know, we've talked about how over time it seemed like the 30s were like a big step forward from the 20s. And this one even seems like kind of a big step forward from that. And knowing that it was a Universal movie, obviously it had some budget behind it. This was like a reputable, production company it was made by a reputable production company, distributed by Universal. But it was on a scale where movies it seems like it had become a pretty big industry and could get some budget behind them. And I think especially coming off the success of some of the earlier creature movies, this one probably proportionally had like some pretty good money and know-how in movie making behind it.
Yeah, it's funny because you and I are pretty much on the same page so far with this film, where like I love the intro, and I actually was tripped out by how crisp the film was, so much so that I thought, well, maybe it's because like we rented like the HD version of it, but it was at the beginning, it tripped me out so much that I was like, there's no way, like this is 100, I swear this is 100% Twilight Zone quality.
Yeah.
Like, which was done 20 years later.
Right.
And, I was like, there's no way, like, this has to be like a remake. Like, I don't get it. But yeah, it was super crisp. Like, the actors and actresses, I mean, it blew my mind, which, I mean, it helps because I'm sure it was redone for, modern, but it still, like, blew my mind. I was like, this is super, super crisp.
Yeah.
And what I thought was also kind of great about it was, like, you could tell the influences from the silent era with the music that played kind of in the background. Like, there were a few scenes that was just straight music for quite a while, and and because we just watched, the 20s and 30s horror movies, like, it was like, yeah, that's a still influence, because it's only been, 20 years since they started doing that, but it was, the style of piano playing and all that was going on in the background. I was just like, that's 100% influence, and just kind of cool to know, I now know where, that came from. Like, you would think the silent era, but, we know for sure because we just watched them.
Yeah. And like very, very loudly mixed music is like a, underpinning of the feeling of the scenes and stuff to like try and make them more intense. And when you can only do so much visually in black and white and with limited special effects, using that like sort of loud music that complements the feeling of the scene goes a long way towards adding to the immersive effect of it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, there were a lot of things I liked about the movie. There were a few things that didn't really land with me, like Larry isn't able to shoot the wolf target at the carnival. And that's always been one of my favorite parts of the werewolf mythology. Can't shoot werewolf targets. So,
yeah.
But then, like, I don't know.
I was actually, like, super, like, I fell in love with this film.
Really?
100%. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
I really did. It's up there with Frankenstein on the classic horror movies for me.
Yeah.
For me, like, when, like, for the wolf scene, like, the way I just kind of interpreted it was more so like it tripped him out because it's a wolf and what he experienced the night, or right before. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, it was just nice. It seemed like, pretty original idea that was done. Crazy. Like, I was also thinking it was crazy how, like, this is iconic. Like, this is the movie that, like, put the Wolfman in there with, the Mummy and Dracula and Frankenstein and all that. And there were scenes that I felt like was pretty, sketchy, like pretty terrifying, in the old movie fashion. Sure. Like, I could see how they could be a little terrified. And for example, when Chaney becomes the wolf the first time.
Right.
And he's just sitting there staring and, like, he just looks really creepy. It was like, I get some of the, I could get how people would be terrified of this movie back in the day. The only thing I really wasn't a huge fan of was how they had him walk, which was like on his tippy toes.
On the pads of his feet, yeah.
And it was just like, that's just bad design. Like, he's a wolf that turned into a man. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, I mean, I get it, like, it's part of the story because they track him, but it's like, you don't have to, like, they wouldn't know otherwise. And like, I'm sure that had to be uncomfortable, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the film.
Yeah. I liked it because it showed a really, really realistic portrayal of the development of a relationship between two people, in that Gwen met Larry and didn't like him, but then less than 70 minutes later was like, look, I know we just met and that you have admitted to killing some people and that you think you're a werewolf, but let's run away together.
Yeah. That's called Ride or Die. Give it the times, Daniel.
That's the world I want to live in.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely, you think, I thought to myself, like, what happened to her original fiance?
Yeah, he just disappeared.
He was gone.
Great. Yeah. But no, it in a very limited amount of time, which I appreciated. One thing that did feel very rushed was like the progression of the relationship between those two. And so it wasn't as like compelling as I think it could have been if it had been developed a little bit different. But
yeah, and it didn't have to be there. Like that relationship didn't have to be there. I don't feel like to progress the film, because it could still be a friend checking in on a friend.
Sure.
Towards the end of the film, where, when they're trying to catch him, it didn't have to be, and you rush something. Why rush it? Instead, just don't add it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did like, though, was that gave them an excuse to not be standing right outside the tent or the cart or whatever it was where Bella was doing the palm reading.
Oh, yeah.
So they didn't see him come out and turn into the wolf. They just saw the wolf later and had no idea, that it would have been the same person. And so that was a convenient way. And then the reason they couldn't explain why was because he didn't want to admit he'd been making out with somebody else's fiance in the woods when it all went down. So, that part made sense to me from a story perspective. But
definitely creepy how it went down. He saw her from a telescope. I don't know. It's just weird. I mean, even I feel like by 1940 standards, it's it's not okay to be a peeping Tom and then use that to benefit to, it's very manipulative.
Well, what I learned from this movie was that if you use a telescope to be a peeping Tom, that will give you the information you need to be charming enough that a woman will immediately fall enough in love with you that even if you kill people and turn into a werewolf, she'll still be willing to run away with you.
Yeah, which I mean...
So, thank you, Universal Pictures.
The only time that this happened outside of this film was when the way that you met your wife was that way. I think that's the only time I've ever heard of it.
But in reverse.
Yeah.
She was the one with the telescope.
Oh, I thought you were going to say she was the werewolf.
Well,
I actually thought
I'm going to stop. I have additional comments that would be funny, but I'm not even going to take a chance on that getting
She doesn't listen.
That's true. No one does. But,
no, that's not true. Shout out to Kate.
Oh, yeah.
What I thought was kind of funny, though, was with the gypsy, when she was talking about what you can kill werewolf with. Well, I just thought it wasn't meant to be comical. I just thought it was, because she was like, it has to be a silver bullet.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like she thought for a second, or a silver knife. And I thought maybe she messed up because he didn't kill the werewolf with either. And then she goes, or a silver club. And it's well, no shit, you have to say that. It's in his hands.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the expert that's oh, yeah, I know how to fix, your PC.
Right.
You don't know how to.
Yeah. There's no telling what you'd turn into if you did that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one scene you talked about, kind of unintentionally funny, there was one scene where they did the zoom in on Larry's face after the gypsy woman has given him the pentagram necklace, and it's showing those flashback scenes. And it's kind of a cool camera trick where they're superimposed over his face. But the way the faces are getting distorted and stuff was just kind of funny more so than scary to me.
Yeah.
And part of that may be just because it looked really dated from the camera effects that were being used. But that was one where I was just okay, that scene didn't hold up super great.
Mm-hmm. But I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, doing something creative with it, yeah, for sure. But I do think this movie did have some scenes that did hold up well, that whole scene towards the end when Larry's dad locks him up in the castle, and then he goes out. The dad is going out and kind of coming back to check on him, and he sees the gypsy woman, and she calls him out. She's "But you're going back because you doubt it, right?" And he doesn't want to admit it and everything. But then Larry does get out. He's transformed into the Wolfman. He sees Gwen, and ends up attacking her. And then his dad ends up being the one that has to fight him off. And so it was just then when he's dead, he turns back into himself. And that was just a super dark ending. Yeah. And I loved it. I was so happy that it felt like we finally had an actual horror movie ending, as opposed to all these others we've watched where, and then the enemy was defeated, roll the credits.
Right. End. Yeah, I agree. It was funny when he did get called out going back, because she's you're going to check on your son, and he's basically going, no.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not either.
Go and check on someone else's son.
Yeah, but it's also, it's okay to check in on sons.
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing good. Are you a werewolf? I don't know. Well, I'm going to strap you to this. Yeah. What I thought was funny was when he was in the, when he was turning back at the end after he died, I thought it was hilarious. Not really, but when he was laying down and he was turning back into the human, the way that he had his mouth was like his chin was like sticking out. Mm-hmm. Like he really pushed his chin out and had like his bottom lip kind of sticking out. Yet again, it was one of those like, I don't think you have to, like, you're not a dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of funny. It kind of reminded me of our Boston with the way that the mouth was set up. But
yeah, I mean, I think that the special effects were definitely pretty ambitious in this movie, in that they were trying to pull off a lot without really having the stuff to get there. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was a really smart choice that they kept him, when he was transformed, sort of in the shadows most of the time. And we've talked about this in most of the episodes with these early movies, where it actually kind of works better when it's a little bit grainy or dark, because you're not focused in on the details of like the makeup or the costuming, and it lets your imagination work a little bit more. Whereas, you know, we have so many examples of more recent movies where like bad CG just kills the movie because they've really focused in on it, and then you can't help but be just like, that's so ridiculous, I can no longer take this seriously or be scared.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when the dad is also like the way he just kind of deals with it, I feel like is like just totally like wrong. Cause it's like, I'm going to lock my son in this chair, but I'm going to leave, when it's like, or you could just sit there and I don't know, watch. But the question I have, the thing I'm just not sure about, the pentagram necklace or, you know, pendant or whatever they call it, she gave it to him because they said it would protect him.
Yeah.
But was that supposed to prevent him from turning into it? Or was he supposed to give it to someone because it did technically protect the person he gave it to, but that was more so because the dad came out and like distracted him, I thought.
Yeah, no, I definitely interpreted it that he was supposed to wear that as protection from the curse. To keep him from turning. Yeah.
What an idiot.
He's too busy flirting. Gave it away. Mm-hmm. Led straight to his downfall.
I know.
The hands of his own father. It was also very like 1940s in that most of the violence was like behind a tree or in almost complete darkness. Like they really were a little bit hesitant to show that. And that I needed to go back and look at the dates on like Hays Code stuff, because I know there was a time when you could get away with a lot more in movies before things started like locking down a bit. And I know that this one was definitely after, but I'm curious on like Bride of Frankenstein. I'm assuming that one was after as well, just because and maybe it's because we're going from like independent German film meant to disturb you to like meant for a wide American audience type movies.
Yeah.
But these definitely feel a lot more lightweight as far as like actual violence, you know?
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like one of the things with the later horror films, like maybe like the 70s, 80s, 90s, like underground film, like kind of independent artists kind of stepped in and started, you know, so you'd have like Texas Chainsaw Massacre with like not too many well-named actors and actresses. And it makes me wonder like when that shifted, because, you know, watching Bride of Frankenstein and this one, you know, that's backed by a big company. It's like, it seems like these are successful. So like, why isn't there a bigger push with those companies, you know, moving forward? Maybe we'll see it, you know, in this 100 years that we're doing, but it makes me wonder where that like got transitioned. Cause, you know, seeing them get murdered behind the tree, you know what they're doing. They're hiding it up, but still showing, it's like showing the murder on the shadow, like they did with, Dr. Caligari. But, I just wonder when that transition kind of happened. Hopefully we find the answer to that.
I hope we don't. I want it to be a mystery forever. Because I want this podcast to have a sad ending just like this movie.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions,
please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.